Washington just sanctioned an Indian firm for moving Iranian oil. But at the exact same moment, the Indian Coast Guard was seizing 3 Iranian-linked tankers off the Mumbai coast. Is this a coincidence? No. This is the new great game in the Arabian Sea. And if you think this is just about oil, you are missing the bigger picture. This is about who controls the Indian Ocean. Let's look at the hard data. On February 6, 2026, the United States Department of State dropped a hammer. They announced sanctions against 15 entities and 14 vessels involved in the Iranian oil trade. This is part of their so-called maximum pressure campaign. But here's where it gets interesting for us. Among those sanctioned was an India-based company called Elevate Marine Management Private Limited and its director Akash Anant Shinde. The accusation is simple. They managed a Cameroon-flagged tanker named Benedict, which allegedly transported Iranian petroleum products. Now, a novice observer might look at this and scream panic. They might say, "Oh no, India and America are fighting, relations are collapsing." But a realist, someone who understands power dynamics, sees something completely different. Because while the Americans were typing out sanction letters in Washington, the Indian Coast Guard was already in the middle of a massive, high-stakes operation in the Arabian Sea, 100 nautical miles west of Mumbai. Close your eyes and visualize the map for a second. We are talking about the gateway to India's economic capital. This is India's exclusive economic zone. In a meticulous sea-air coordinated operation, the Indian Coast Guard intercepted not one but 3 massive vessels, the Al Jawzia, the Asphalt Star, and the Stella Ruby. These ships were engaged in illegal mid-sea transfers, moving oil from the Persian Gulf to evade taxes and sanctions. This is the reality of the shadow fleet, and this is the first lesson of our analysis today. The shadow fleet is not just a Western problem, it is a global security nightmare. These are old, rusting buckets of bolts, vessels that have no insurance, no proper flag, and they turn off their automatic identification systems, or AIS, to become invisible ghosts on the ocean. Why does this matter to you? Because if one of these ghost ships sinks or explodes 100 miles off Mumbai, who pays for the environmental disaster? The Americans? No. The Iranians? No. India pays. The oil washes up on Juhu Beach and Marine Drive. So, when the Indian Coast Guard seized these ships, do not make the mistake of thinking India did this to please the United States. That is a naive interpretation. India did not seize these ships because Donald Trump asked nicely. India seized them because New Delhi is sending a message to the world. We police our own waters. This brings us to the geography, because in geopolitics, geography is destiny. Look at the coastline of Western India, from the Gulf of Kutch in Gujarat down to the Konkan coast. This is the primary transit route for energy coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. Every single day, millions of barrels of crude oil pass through these lanes. If India allows this shadow fleet to operate freely, if India turns a blind eye to illegal ship-to-ship transfers in its own backyard, do you know what happens next? External powers step in. The US Navy or the Combined Maritime Forces will start patrolling closer and closer to Indian territorial waters, claiming they are there to stop smuggling. No sovereign nation wants foreign navies policing its doorstep. By busting this racket, by seizing these 3 ships and detaining the crew, India is asserting its role as the net security provider in the Indian Ocean. The message to Washington is clear. You handle the sanctions, we'll handle the security. We do not need your intervention. Now, let's address the hypocrisy in the room. It is the job of an analyst to cut through the diplomatic noise. The United States has sanctioned an Indian firm, Elevate Marine, for transporting Iranian oil. Fair enough, that is their domestic law. But let us not pretend this is about moral high ground. The West has been buying refined petroleum products derived from Russian crude for years, often laundered through third-party nations. The global energy market is a complex web of necessity. Washington knows that if all Iranian and all Russian oil suddenly vanished from the market tomorrow, oil prices would hit $200 a barrel. The global economy would collapse. So, they play this game game of whack-a-mole. They sanction a small Indian firm here, a UAE trader there, just to keep the pressure on without actually breaking the market. It is performative escalation. They want to squeeze Iran ahead of nuclear talks, and Indian companies are simply collateral damage in this wider war. But here's the danger for India. The United States is becoming unpredictable. The sanctioning of an Indian national, a specific individual, takes this to a personal level. It signals that the US Treasury Department is watching every single transaction. For Indian companies, the lesson is brutal but simple. Compliance is no longer optional. You cannot play both sides in the financial sector because the US dollar is still the weapon of choice. However, notice the silence from the Indian government regarding the sanctions. There is no outrage, no screaming match. Why? Because the Indian state is separating the private sector from the national interest. If a private firm breaks US laws and gets sanctioned, that is their problem. The government will not burn diplomatic capital to save a single company that was likely engaging in high-risk profiteering. But the seizure of the ships, that is state policy. That is the Indian government acting. And that's where the strength lies. By cracking down on this smuggling ring, India effectively neutralizes any American complaint. If Washington says India is helping Iran evade sanctions, New Delhi can simply point to the 3 captured ships sitting in Mumbai harbor and say, "Look again, we are enforcing the law more effectively than you are." It's a masterstroke of realpolitik. You take a hit on one side with the sanctions, but you deliver a knockout blow on the other side with the Coast Guard operation. It keeps the balance, it maintains the equilibrium. So, what is the strategic lesson here for India? It's about capacity building. We talk about being a Vishwaguru, a world leader. But you cannot be a world leader if you cannot control your own seas. The shadow fleet is only going to grow. As sanctions on Russia and Iran continue, more and more rogue vessels will enter the Indian Ocean. India needs to expand its Coast Guard capabilities. We need more surveillance aircraft, more fast patrol vessels, and stricter laws that allow for the immediate confiscation of these ghost ships. We cannot rely on intelligence tips from the West. We need our own eyes in the sky and our own boots on the deck. The seizure of the Al Jazeera and its companion ships proves that India has the capability. But this was just one syndicate. There are dozens more operating in the dark, turning off their transponders, painting over their names, and faking their flags. This is a cat-and-mouse game, and the mouse is getting smarter. Ultimately, this week was a wake-up call. It showed us that the arm of US sanctions is long, but the reach of the Indian Navy and Coast Guard is getting longer. We are not just bystanders in the US-Iran conflict anymore. We are active participants, whether we like it or not. The Arabian Sea is our front yard, and we have to keep it clean. Now, before we sign off, a quick question to test your geopolitical knowledge. We talked about the choke point for oil. Approximately 20 to 30% of the world's total oil consumption passes through which strait? Is it A, the Strait of Malacca, B, the Strait of Hormuz, C, the Bab el-Mandeb, or D, the Bosporus Strait? Leave your answer in the comments below. In geopolitics, there are no permanent friends and no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. India protected its interests this week, and that is all that matters. Thank you for listening.